side every day of our lives. Ronald's coming back now and he's here to stay. Back to give you love in every day. Now I'm here and you're gone. It's so hard to go on. Just one day without you is too long a time. Counting every hour in my mind. Now I know what it's like. Now don't say you let the world be standing in your way. You got me by your side, don't be afraid. No matter how they try, I'll fight for you right by your side every day of our lives. Ronald's coming back now and he's here to stay. Got to give you love in every day. Now I'm here and you're gone. It's so hard to go on. Just one day without you is too long a time. Counting every hour in my mind. Now I know what it's like. Ronald's coming back now and he's here to stay. Back to give you love in every day. Now I'm here and you're gone. It's so hard to go on. Just one day without you is too long a time. Counting every hour in my mind. Now I know to be here all alone. I'm so sorry that I left you alone. Now I know.
Let your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Let us play with all our toys and let us think that we're big boys and let us make a lot of noise for women move away.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Spaced Out Radio Network at spacedoutradio.com. As we come in from the frozen Canadian tundra, battle our way past the wild animals, sidestep Bigfoot, and enter Uncle Jimbo's cabin, stoke the fire, heat this place up, and broadcast you live on this Friday night, early Saturday morning if you're on the East Coast. Here at SOR, we do this thing 7 days a week, 3 hours a night, as we want to be your official one-stop shop when it comes to the supernatural, paranormal, conspiratorial, ufological, and so much more. Space Out Radio's theme music is brought to you by guitar god Ron Bumblefoot THAL. You can find his new album, Little Brother Is Watching, by going to our website, spacedoutradio.com. If you're a social media junkie like I am, you can follow us on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and on there, you can actually hear our archives. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, as we do every night, we want to welcome in our listeners taking part in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, Paranormal Forum, and along the SHR Media Network. If you're a fan of Spaced Out Radio, coming soon to our website is the Space Travelers membership, where for only $5 a month, you can win prizes, take part in private group interviews, have a special section on our website, and so much more. Hey, we're going to give you a heck of a lot more than just access to our archives. Tonight's show is brought to you by Rivulet Reiki and Readings, providing healings in person or at a distance. Help heal your body, mind, and soul by purpleplates.com. 80,000 people a month read the New Agora newspaper, the official newspaper of Spaced Out Radio, and the official ghost hunting app of Spaced Out Radio is the iPhone app, Spirit Storybox. It only costs $1. After an interesting time of overtime with Olaf Phillips last night talking about the United States Secret Space Program, we're sticking up in the skies tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Tonight we are sticking close to home, though. Well, for this show at least, and talking Canadian UFOlogy with investigator Michel Deschamps. Michel has been on the Canadian UFO scene for well over 3 decades, looking into the mysterious and anomalous sightings that are happening here around the Great White North. The top 3 places for sightings in Canada are, and it's really no surprise here, the 3 biggest metropolises in the country, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, leading the way with sightings being reported and followed through with accurate reports. Newfors.com, that's spelled Noufors.com, is Michel's website where he investigates both the history of ufology in Canada as well as the current and recent sightings as well. We bring in Michel Deschamps now from Newfors.com. Michel, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
Not too bad. Just a little bit under the weather. Problem with my voice, my throat, but other than that, I'm okay.
Excellent. You know what? It's so good to have you on the air because we talk a lot about UFOs on this show, and I'm an experiencer as well. And in the end, this is why I started Spaced Out Radio back on November 14th, make that November 30th, 2014. And I did that because I couldn't find the personal answers that I was searching for the sightings that I was saying. Now, as we've developed this show, Michel, a lot of our guests and most of our listeners are actually south of the border in the United States. And we hear all the American stories from Roswell to what's happening at Area 51, out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. We've heard them all. However, we're not as familiar with what is happening in Canada. How much of a hotspot is the country of Canada when it comes to ufology?
Well, I can only speak for where I'm from. I live in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. As far as I know, considered the nickel capital of the world. We have two mining giants. They have changed names since a few years now, but I still regard them as Falconbridge and Inco. And my dad worked for Falconbridge. That's how we came here from northern Quebec in 1968. Of all places that he could have chosen to move the family to was a UFO hotspot. And I was 4.5 when we moved here, and years later, when I was in high school, I started collecting information. I picked a subject out of thin air. I says, I'd like to research something in depth. And at that time, the term flying saucer came out. Project UFO was on the air on TV, and I said, you know what? I'm going to look into that. But I got to tell you, frankly, I bit off more than I could chew. I tell you, I had no expectations of what I was going to find in terms of UFOs and related matters. But boy, was I ever surprised.
There are a lot of Canadian ufologists around the country, and whether they're here in Vancouver, whether they are in Ontario, such as yourself, a couple of famous ones, Victor Vigiani out of Toronto, Grant Cameron out of Winnipeg, who really has done some incredible research in regards to presidents of the United States and their UFO connections. It's very interesting indeed. When you look at our country, and I know you can only speak for Ontario, but in Canada in general, as reports have come out recently in regards to Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal being three of the hotbeds, are you surprised that it's our three biggest metropolises that are having the most sightings recorded?
No, I'm not. Excuse me. I'm not really surprised. See, the misconception was that back in the day, UFO sightings were made in rural areas, during a 2-second sighting by the town drunk or, the less regarded people of the populace. But as it turns out, UFOs seem to have a high interest in the metropolitan areas as well as the small hick towns or whatever, whether it's because of the nature, the natural resources. I mean, we have a lot of lakes here. I've been to Alberta, so I've seen the Rockies. We have beautiful scenery. Whether it's a vacationing spot for them, I don't know, but I've lived in Toronto as well, and I've also lived in Montreal. And I can see the attraction. I mean, if you're going to investigate a planet that has life, you're going to look for signs of civilization. And the first thing you're going to look for is there any large cities? And what's the population like? What do they behave like? What are they like? What's their technological achievements? What's their weaponization? You're going to look at all that. So I'm not surprised.
As we warm up and our crowd starts to come into the show, I would love it if you would kind of take the time, Michel, and explain how you got involved with ufology. Why did this become your passion?
That's a question that's been asked many times. Sometimes I don't know if it's a sighting that propelled my interest or if it's something I decided to do at age 9 that all of a sudden propelled me into a world that I had no idea how large it actually was. And when I had a sighting when I was 9, For years, I didn't really take it as such because I thought maybe it was something I copied off TV. I would have seen on TV or something. And only years later, when I moved to Niagara Falls, Ontario, I purchased a book about Canadian sightings. And in one of the chapters was actually about Sudbury, Ontario, and Eastern Townships. A couple of days in the month of July 1974. And I kind of scratched my head and I says, holy shit, that's when my brother's birthday is July 13th. And at that time, we used to have a park at the end of our street. It was a hockey rink. But in the summer, there was a 2-story building where the teenagers would hold their dances on the second floor. And on the main floor, people would send their kids there to do finger painting. So I was outside and not inside doing finger painting. I was outside looking at the sky. And that's when I noticed this metallic looking sphere that just hovered above the tree line. And I thought maybe advertising balloon, maybe, but it wasn't tied down and it was motionless. And like I said, only years later when I got that book, it described having all these sightings of these whitish, bluish spheres that people would see, these spherical objects. But at the same time, which was not known to the people on the ground, there was a CP air flight that had just left Montreal for Winnipeg, and right above Sudbury, at that same time, above Sudbury, it encountered a 100-foot diameter disc, and it had to do 2 evasive maneuvers in order not to collide, because that's the greatest fear of the pilots. The UFOs never collide with them, normally, but they have that fear that, hey, that thing should not be in our way. And apparently, in that particular flight, they made all the passengers look out the window, and they all saw the object. So that could have been the mothership that delivered all these smaller spheres that people were reporting down below.
That is incredible. I've never heard that story. And CP Air is a defunct airline here in Canada. And when this happened, right over Sudbury, and there were people all on that flight who got to see this aircraft or this UFO. How highly reported was this incident?
As far as I know, only in that particular book written by Yurko Bondarchuk. It's UFOs Over Canada by Yurko Bondarchuk. And, I just bought the book at a used bookstore in Niagara Falls. And here's this story about not just Sudbury, but at the same time they were having sightings in Drummondville, Quebec, of a bell-shaped object. Mm-hmm. And it ran for a good 2-3 days between the 12th and the 15th of July, 1974.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time I've got to talk to you, Michel, and so we're going into this nice and cold, and I'm actually kind of excited about that because it's not very often I get to share my own stories with you. Okay. What brought me into this field was in 2014 I started having in 2012 I started having a plethora of UFO sightings. I started having pretty much any time I want, from black triangles to orbs over my house in the middle of the daytime. It was pretty interesting. Where it got really surreal for me was almost exactly 2 years ago when we were over at a friend's house, Mrs. Spaced Out Radio and myself, and I all of a sudden started getting what I thought was a migraine headache. It turned out that it was actually shapes pulsating on my head. And I came down with an absolute anxiety attack that I had to go outside to their back 10 acres to see what was there. So I took one of my friends with me. We went outside, and in the same volume that I'm talking to you and our listeners, I said, "You called us outside out of God's peace, love, and light. Can you please show me where you are?" And 150 feet away, or make that about 150 yards away, pardon me, and the entire forest tree line lit up from the ground. And here I was with my friend staring at this UFO on the ground. And it did that 3 times for me. It lit itself up before it disappeared. And when you start having sightings like that, they impact you. When you had your own personal experiences, did it impact you as well, where it just kind of rattled you to wonder whether or not we've been told the truth about life?
Actually, it took me up to my 10th sighting before I realized. I said to myself, I says, you freaking idiot. You look at the stuff that you've seen, and you cannot explain it in any conventional terms by any stretch of the imagination. This stuff is really going on. And this is only after my 10th sighting. I've had 27 sightings since 1974. Some of them were reported to me at first being somebody else's sighting, and I would see the very back end of it, like the very end of the sighting. And so, yeah, it took me 10 sightings to realize before that, I'd be going through my personal checklist. Is it a helicopter? No. It's hovering like a helicopter, but it's not making any sound. Does a helicopter only have a single light source on it moving away from your eyes? No, that doesn't make sense. That would indicate like a single light at the back end of an airplane, let's say, but no sound. I can pick out the sound of an airplane, an airliner at 35,000 feet, no problem, at night especially. And soon after that, I've only made one mistake once where I saw a cluster of 3 lights. One big light flanked by 2 smaller ones. Couldn't hear the sound, and I flashed my flashlight at it. I waited for the object to pass over me, and 10 seconds behind the object, 10 seconds behind, you can make out the sound of the plane. So I said, shit, I felt like an idiot. Here I am flagging the plane down, and the airport is right behind me. I says, okay, before I go to the media with any report, I have to make damn sure that what I'm looking at is out of the ordinary, and I've already gone through my list, because otherwise the last thing you want is to look like an idiot in front of your family members, in the media, and the public in general.
I think that's a really important topic to actually touch on, because so many in the mainstream do not take what we do very seriously. They think we're a bunch of wackos who have mental issues, whether it's schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. You've heard them all. You know, we're talking on camera right now. I could see you laughing while you're saying that. And one of the things that I'm curious about, do you think as society starts looking more at their phones than up in the skies, that we're going to see less and less quality reports actually make it?
Yeah, well, take for instance the known fact so far that the unknowns actually accumulate to maybe 10%. Now, when Project Blue Book closed down, they basically said that the unknown 3%, had they been investigated more thoroughly, would have been found to be nothing out of the ordinary. But when somebody did the research for that Project Blue Book Special Report 14, turns out that the unknowns were 23.5%. Not just 3%, but 23.5% were unknowns. And it says, well, how do you know that they were categorized unknowns and not something that didn't have enough information to list it as an unknown? Well, they had a separate list of insufficient information. You cannot label it an unknown if you did not have enough of all the details to label it as such. Well, I still say today that the percentage of unknowns has still got to be in the 20% because remember, only 10% of the sightings are actually being reported. And so if 10% of that 10% turns out to be unknowns, imagine how many of the other 90% that are going unreported are actually true unknowns. Now, the problem today, we have problems with Chinese lanterns. We have problems with drones, although I have yet to see one fly anywhere. I know one guy has one, and he's filmed over the Inco property, which is against the law. But we have a problem now where Chinese lanterns are being flown for any type of celebration or anniversary. And I've seen those myself. But people tend to forget is that Chinese lanterns move at the whim of the winds, the current of the winds. UFOs will fly against the wind. They'll hover for hours on end. And so that's why even though I have a page on my website that says how to identify a UFO in 30 minutes or less, sometimes you may have to stay outside for a couple of hours looking at the object that you're looking at to make sure that it's not a plane, helicopter, satellite, International Space Station, meteorite, bolide, fireball, and all of the above. So I created a page that has all those criteria of what to look for in a UFO sighting, and then plus all the list of the so-called quick fix explanations for UFOs. So it's people need to educate themselves and not assume that they see something for a second that is a UFO right off the bat. You have to look at it, listen for sound, and hopefully if you're near a military base, then that would be something I would look into before you run to the media and say you've seen a UFO, if it's some kind of military flight. Here we used to have a radar base that was made famous in 1975, the famous Falcon Bridge radar base, which was overflown with UFOs at about the same time as 4 military installations in the States were overflown by UFOs in November of 1975. Well, that base no longer exists. The closest base to us now, if there's anything left military there, is in North Bay, which is 2 hours east of here. And I have not seen too many military aircraft fly around here in the last decade or so. So whatever we have flying here, first of all, is silent. First of all, and second of all, is displaying colors of such vivid purples and pinks and blues that you don't find on typical aircraft, and so on. So it's fascinating that the 10% seems to linger, but I think that the unknowns is a much higher percentage. But once people become trained observers themselves, and although the skeptics might like to argue that point, I believe after you've had a certain amount of sightings,
we're just having a Skype freeze right now. There we go. We just had a little bit of a Skype freeze there. So,
sorry.
Let me get to this because we only got about 3 minutes before we go to our break here at the bottom of the hour. I have actually seen a drone, and when my wife and I were starting to have a lot of UFO sightings, it was getting to the point for us where it was every night, and we could define the difference between a satellite and something that was not a satellite, let's say, it would seem to be at the same altitude. And one thing that we noticed was the more we had these UFO sightings or anomalous lights in the sky that were going by, the more we were getting air traffic of, say, like Cessnas and other things flying around our house. And what made it interesting was one night there was a Cessna, and it had its red and blues going with its strobe flasher. And literally, probably 150 yards behind it was this weird-looking aircraft with just 2 white lights on it, and they weren't strobing. And until it passed our house, we didn't hear any sound until it went past. And then we could hear the propeller on the second aircraft. And we figured out right then and there that there was a drone flying by our house. And it was the first time I had seen a drone, because Vancouver International has a drone factory there. Factory is that manufacturing plant, let's call it that. Okay. And they actually sell and rent out drones to the Canadian military and to the U.S. military. And one of the things I found very interesting was this drone didn't have the regular lights on it. And I found that very strange, that all of a sudden my wife and I are getting all of these sightings of UFOs, and then this drone just happens to fly by a Cessna. Have you heard of that before?
No, that's pretty unusual. But the drone, like, I'm assuming it's shaped like a plane. It has wings and vertical stabilizers, the typical things that you need lift for, I that's another thing I went for online. I looked for all kinds of drones that are out on the market or owned by or used by the military, and included an aquatic drone, which was pretty oddly shaped but pretty cool to look at. And so, because I try to stay on top of this stuff so that if people report anything, they'll have a visual photograph of what to look for if what they're seeing is a drone and not something out of this world, you know?
We are talking with Michel Deschamps tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He's a Canadian ufologist out of Northern Ontario. You can check out his website, Newfors.com. Newfors is Noufors.com. We are going to put you on hold for just a couple of seconds here, Michel. Well, a couple of minutes. We're going to hop out for our first break of the night. When we come back, we're going to get Michel to break down UFO sighting criteria. That way we can all learn what to look for and what to decipher up in the sky. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? On the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Hi there. This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is Elizabeth Anglin, and on the last Monday of every month, I join Dave Scott for Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport. We delve into everything from extraterrestrial contact to animal communication. It's a lot of fun, and every month it's something different and exciting. I would love it if you would join us. You can hear and learn from my experiences, and I'd like to know about yours as well. Cosmic Passport on spacedoutradio.com.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Webster Small, and I'm here to bring you the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night, live at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for aliens and extraterrestrials, well, we've got them. Big and tall, short and small. You're bound to find what you're looking for, so join me on the Webster Phenomena right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Have you ever wondered about those weird and strange creatures people have reported throughout history? Do you wonder if those stories are real? Me too, and that's why I started Cryptopia.us. Hey, this is Rob Morphy, crypto historian. Join me once a month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will get into the odd and bizarre reports, from the Dover Demon to hairy hominids and everything in between. I will break down what people like you and me are seeing at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to advertise on Spaced Out Radio? Getting your message out to Spaced Out Radio's listeners will benefit you. Our listeners are loyal, intelligent, and supportive, and they support those who support this broadcast. For pricing and information, you could go to spacedoutradio.com to find the pricing guide that suits your needs, with many options to choose from. Advertise with Spaced Out Radio today by contacting us at info@spacedoutradio.com.
Want to connect with us online? Find us on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show, on Twitter @Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR, on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. All right, space travelers, here comes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio. Welcome back to the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Tomorrow night and Sunday, Uncle Jimbo James Tyson is in the hot seat for Spaced Out Weekend starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Once again, all of our shows start at 9 p.m. Pacific. We've extended Spaced Out Radio by 1 hour's time. So, it would be real fun if you could join him on the weekend while I wander off into the wilderness trying to find my Zen, my Chi, trying to find anything I can for my own personal enlightenment. I got my backpack ready to head off into the wilderness. Maybe I'll find Sasquatch. Hey, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. All of our archives are on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio Show. Click the little subscribe button on that. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking UFOlogy up here in Canada with Michel Deschamps. His website is newfors.com. That's spelled NOUFORS.com. We bring in Michel for the second half hour tonight. Michel, I know you're battling a cold, but you're a real trooper doing this for us tonight.
Oh, thank you. I'll try to, be as eloquent of a speaker as I usually am when I have my normal voice.
Mm-hmm. I don't mind whatsoever. I know you'll get through. You got that French-Canadian accent going, so it's working for you, my friend. It's working for you.
Yeah, well, I thought I would have gotten rid of that years ago, but apparently not. So it's here to stay. It's here to stay.
For the break, you brought up something interesting, and that was UFO sighting criteria chart. What made you do that?
Yeah. Well, along with other pages I create on the website, I hadn't seen anything. I had not seen anything like that on any other website. And I thought that it was a mistake not to have that anywhere because people need reference guides as to what to look for, color, whatever. And so I, as an idea would come to my mind, I said, okay, well, I can create a page about that so people will just get the basic gist of what to look for in a sighting. If you happen to be an avid skywatcher, that is. Like you said earlier, though, the tendency of looking down at your cell phone, your belly button, walking down the street when everything around you is going on, it's a pretty sad state of affairs, because if that same person looking at a cell phone, texting while walking or whatever, would spend an entire week looking at the sky, I'd be willing to bet 100 to 1 that they would see something out of the ordinary. Hopefully not mistaking, Venus or Jupiter for a UFO if they're not accustomed to looking at the night sky. Of course, I have had cases where people have been reporting Jupiter and Venus to me as a UFO. So you have to familiarize yourself with the astronomical charts and planets and constellations as well. But hopefully it'll get better. People will have a tendency to just look at the sky and look down at their belly buttons and their cell phones less and less. So I basically created this one page called, if you look in the margin, you'll see all the stuff the most important pages of my website. I have over 1,300 pages on my website, but the links in the margin are all the more important pages. Cops and saucers, those specifically dedicated to police sightings made of UFOs by police officers. I have pilots in UFOs. I have politicians in UFOs, celebrities in UFOs. Well, UFO characteristics is the one page I wanted to put together so that people would know what to look for if they want to try to distinguish a UFO sighting from a man-made object or astronomical phenomena. So I have 8 criteria. So you got shape, color or colors, sound or lack thereof, size, speed, behavior, level of high strangeness, and duration of the sighting. A lot of times people have this misconception that sightings will last only seconds, but sometimes you'd be surprised at how long a UFO can hover in place, even compared to a helicopter. A helicopter will still be buffeted by winds, but a UFO will be rock solid right there in the air, not moving an inch. So, as I put at the top of the page here, contrary to what the skeptics will tell you, it is possible for anyone to easily identify or distinguish UFOs from any man-made objects and natural phenomena in the sky. Once you've had your first sighting of an unidentified flying object and you familiarize yourself with the night sky, you'll quickly become a good observer and you'll know exactly what to look for the next time you're sky watching.
I find that very interesting because I'm looking at the list right now at newforce.com. And shape, color, sound I get, size, speed I get, behavior. Can you break down what level of high strangeness is and what you mean by that?
That would be if all of a sudden the object would do like loop-to-loops, right-angle turns at a very high velocity, which is impossible for any aircraft to do, including helicopters. Drones, excuse me. Drones, it's another story, because most of these toy drones that people buy that have a camera, really good HD camera, I might add, the 4 propellers, I think, only allow it to fly horizontally. Well, I mean, they can go straight up vertically, but I would find it difficult to see how fast it could do like a loop-to-loop if there's a way for this thing to go on the side. Because the way the propellers are built, maybe if it lifts even the slightest on its side, you're going to see it go from left to right and not really do anything fantastic as these UFOs have been recorded doing. Also, the one thing that UFOs seem to be able to do, which we don't have anything that can do that, is the ability to submerge in water and then resurface. You know, the only thing I know that we have, in this case military, is the Trident missile being launched from a nuclear sub. Now, that's the only time you'll have an object that departs from another object, which is submerged. But you don't see the missile coming back after it's done its run and re-enter the sub, you know, or in the water. So that's one of the high strangeness you'd have to look for if you're lucky to live near a body of water like the coast of Vancouver or the coast of California, where there's a lot of sightings by Catalina Island. So that's one thing to look for amongst many for the high level of high strangeness. For the last criteria, like I said, some sightings may last seconds. So you may not be able to determine that it's a UFO, like something from another planet, unless the damn thing lands in front of you and it looks like a saucer with a tripod leg, landing gear. Then you'll say, well, there's no denying that. You know, I know people that have actually seen beings, they've seen beings standing inside the object, which was hovering, and they were looking in at the object with a 600 power telescope. And this is the late 60s. One of my friends from Inco, who's now 80 years old, has had so many sightings since 1966. Before that, he was a pure skeptic. And he happened to work at one of the 2 mining sites I told you about, which seems to attract UFOs on a somewhat regular basis. So for him, there's no question that there's objects that come from someplace else because they display a behavior and maneuverability that we can't even match, no matter what we have. Whether it's a toy drone or a military drone that looks to me like a plane, you know, the vertical stabilizers and wings. If you see an object that's circular in shape and there's no way for it to stay aloft, then I'd be scratching my head and say, what the hell is that? If it's got no propellers and it puts out light brighter than daylight, which is another level of high strangeness. I've heard that account, that report, or that quality of sighting reported through Linda Moulton Howe, where people have reported UFOs casting light that's brighter than daylight. And that's another thing too. Lights on UFOs are very, very weird. They don't cast light and they don't cast shadows. So there's weirdness about it through and through. You just gotta be very persistent. And if you happen to live in a hot spot, well, it wouldn't be long before you got to use this checklist and check off every single thing that's on there.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you with the lights, because when I had that landing happen 150 yards away from me, Michelle, the one thing that I remember the most on it when I look back is, as bright as the white lights were emanating through the trees that separated from where we were from where this thing was the fact that I remember that light being probably one of the brightest white lights I have ever seen. And yet, I never had to squint. I never had to squint, because when you get up close to bright lights, it hurts your eyes. You start to squint. You start to close your eyes a little bit and see, just how much that light is hurting your pupils and your retinas and everything like that. But with this bright light that I saw, and my friend who was with me also commented on it, we didn't have to squint. We could just take it all in. And I've never seen anything like that before, and I don't know if I'll ever see anything like that again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what happens with your sightings. When you have however many sightings you've had, same with me, you never know if you'll have the same sighting twice. As far as I know, every single object I saw was different from one to the next. And the one sighting that impressed me the most, well, my first sighting now, looking back and realizing what it was, is pretty neat. But my next sighting over after that one was when I was in my 20s, old enough to know what a plane was. And we have the Sudbury Airport not far from where the radar base used to be. Actually, eye level to eye level used to be at the airport. And you can see right across the way on the next hilltop was where the radar base used to be. And the one sighting I had there in 1990 in October, first of all, it looked like Jupiter at its brightest. But the odd thing was, as it gradually was coming down, it almost reminded me of that sighting over Jerusalem Temple. But unlike that particular case, as the light was coming down, it was getting brighter. So right away, I thought, holy shit, this light is coming down at a 45-degree angle as it got brighter. And even though it was 6 miles away, there's all these chains of hills that eventually led to the radar base. I saw that object from 3 different vantage points. And the last place I saw it, it was hovering next to the radar base. The radar base had already been closed a few years previous, in 87 or 86. And this is in October 1990. There's no leaves on the trees. I could see it clearly. It was pulsating reddish pink, but a very odd color. And the next day I went back looking through binoculars, and I estimated its size to be the same as one particular structure of the radar base, which later on I went and measured with 2 people from a local little tabloid newspaper. And it turns out that it was 40 feet across, because the building itself was 40 feet by 40 feet. And initially I'd reported the sighting as being as large as a car, but you see a car at that distance from where I was exactly 4.5 miles away. But then I said, no, it was bigger than a car. And when we measured the building, that particular building, before they finally raised everything to the ground more recently, I get an estimate. It's not always precise, and it's very hard to distinguish size at night and distance. That's the only frustrating thing about seeing something at night. It's very hard to calculate distance and very hard to calculate size.
When you talk to people and they tell you their experiences in regards to what they are seeing, how many are actually seeing UFOs, and in your opinion, how many are seeing maybe a strange military aircraft that we don't know about?
Around here, it's less than 1% for the people that report the stuff that they've seen. We don't have. There's nothing of military value here anymore. The Falconbridge radar base is now gone. I have one souvenir here. I was not a vandal, but we got into the base one time, and the only souvenir I managed to get is that piece of paper that you find in the elevator that tells you how much, what the weight restriction is for the elevator itself. And it says Department of National Defense, 86, 87, which is when the base was closed. And so I have that piece of paper. The window on the elevator shaft, or the doorway, was actually broken. It was probably 5 inches by 5 inches. And I reached in, and that piece of paper was inside of a plastic envelope stuck on the wall. And it's the only thing I could remove. So now I look back at that thing, which is hanging on my wall here, and I have a souvenir, the only existing thing left from the radar base. I plan to make a model to display what the base looked like with its domes, its spheres on it. And when later years, when they took the domes off, when I had my sighting, because the domes were long gone, the base had already been closed. And my assumption is, see, UFO beings are not stupid. They must have known that back in 75 and any other time after that, when there's a radar lock on, they know it. So I think they were simply there investigating why was the base no longer operating. It's the only reason. Why would it stop after I saw it from another location and it traveled 6 miles over the hilltops until it reached that last hilltop before you get to the airport is where the base was. There can't be any other explanation why it stopped there. Mm-hmm. And so that was my second sighting, and I tried to sketch it as best as I could, because in my family, there's a few of us that are pretty good artists, and I wish I knew how to use Photoshop so I can do a better rendition of some of my sightings and other people's sightings. But it's the one sighting that impressed me and got me out of the ufological closet, so to speak. It took me 3 days to gather the nerves to speak to the police officers. It's the only place at that time I had not joined MUFON at that time. Didn't even know about MUFON. And I called the police, and they just kept me online long enough to determine whether or not I was nuts. And that was it.
That brings
I knew right then. I knew right then the police department was not the place to call to report a sighting.
And that was my next question leading up. That brings up an interesting question in regards to, in Canada here, who do we really have across this country to file these reports to? Because MUFON is very scattered up north. It's not very organized. We can be honest about that. Not like it is in the United States. The RCMP have bigger and better things to do than to worry about somebody who sees a strange craft in the air, although they do say they want the reports. Have you ever investigated what the police do with those reports here in Canada? Or is it just like a code that can't be cracked?
One particular person told me that they wound up in dead letter files, and whether or not they're actually still in some basement filing cabinet, or if Ottawa at the time came up and got them and eventually made their way to the National Archives, I don't know. But there was a lot of some of the initial sighting observers to the sighting in 1975 were actually police officers and a nursing staff at a nursing home. And so, and many times I've heard stories of police chasing UFOs down the highway. And it's too bad that information is not put forth, because people would then realize, well, it's not just a bunch of idiots reporting sightings. We're talking about cops that are supposed to be trained for any eventuality, or so they thought, because they're not trained to chase after UFOs, but I'm sure they've had their close call. And I have a few news clipping articles that talk about that kind of stuff. But yeah, the files, I would really be interested in seeing anything like that. You know, just as much as I love looking for the physical evidence, because that to me is what would put the last nail in the coffin. You're trying to explain to people that these things are real, but you're trying to focus on physical evidence, which is not a lot of it going around. You get a lot of pictures of landing sites, but there's not a whole lot of books that were ever written about UFO landing sites and what the analysis of the soil, revealed. And it's too bad. But the police reports, they're just as interesting to me as the reports made by pilots, for instance, which are also another branch of trained observers.
Out of the police reports that you have checked out, could you give us a couple of examples of those?
Well, the only one report I ever did get, it was a former OPP officer who actually submitted to me a short letter, and I don't know if I've scanned it and placed it on the website, but I plan to. I don't even have a photograph of the officer, but his name was Alan Cook, and he had a sighting in the Killarney Provincial Park area in 1977 of a rectangular shaped object, like just a box moving over the tree line in 1977. And when I find that letter, I'll make sure to scan it and include it with my Cops and Saucers page, because it's the only time. Well, there's another police officer in town who hurt his neck and he's retired or whatever, and he had a sighting as well. And I have the audio of that interview, if you want to call it that. The way I do my recordings of people, other people like that kind of stuff because you can hear the emotion in the voice of the witnesses themselves. And it's not just me talking for them. So I don't have a lot of police reports, but I think I was asked to combine what I'd found out with a constable. He's a constable from the UK who also has a website specifically dedicated to police reports of UFOs. And I have his link on my Cops and Saucers page. But yeah, I wish those reports were more forthcoming, because I've spoken to some police officers since then about anything like that, and I would love to even do a presentation, because I have so much information from the States and elsewhere about what the police officers themselves have seen and chased down the highway. Those were all ideas they got for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when you see that chase scene in there where the cop car goes right over. Well, I don't know if that ever happened in real life, but I'm sure in the excitement of the pursuit, there's a good possibility a couple of times, man, a police officer's car might have been in a wreck because they were following something that could outrun them, no problem.
When you have talked to police officers in regards to UFOs, whether they're RCMP or whether they are Ontario Provincial Police officers, have they ever told you what the protocol is for a UFO sighting or a UFO landing, shall we say?
No, I've never really asked them that. It's something I should do, because where I work in a retail store, and I'm not really supposed to talk to the officers when they're there. They're there to arrest some shoplifter or whatever. And a couple of occasions I gave up my card for my website. But I would like to know if they have anything in place, kind of like what the firefighters have in place in the States. Now, that one manual, it's a disaster control manual for the firefighters. And one chapter is totally dedicated to UFOs and potential enemy attacks. And of course, you look and say, well, if there was a UFO crash, who would be the first people at the scene? It would be firefighters trying to put out the fire, if they think it's a crashed airplane or whatever. I kind of wondered about that. If our Canadian counterparts of the fighting department would have the same or a similar manual that has a chapter dedicated to what to do in the eventuality of getting to a UFO crash site. But as I know now, the probability of civilians getting to a crash site first before the military is very slim, because in the States, and including Canada, there is something called SAGE. And SAGE, I don't know if it's still in operating mode today, but it was a network of radar setups. So, and if the military, of course, is obviously tied in with NORAD, and NORAD has the best equipment for tracking anything in outer space and at low level, of course the military is going to get there first because they have the best technology. They know exactly when something's coming down. They know exactly when something's going up. I have a few interesting reports from the radar base that I used to have here, where my friend who worked at INCO witnessed this one particular sighting where the object was tracked until it disappeared below the radar line, was over the INCO property for 15 minutes and caused an initial blackout, which was reported to New York City because that's where the power came, the power to power the plants. And then 15 minutes later, the object left. And my friend said that the radar base got a hold of him after they had spoken to him before, because he had a lot of sightings and he reported them. They openly admitted to him that when the object left the area, it took off at 22,000 miles an hour.
Wow.
And
that is
yard,
incredible.
At the INCO property, all it looked like was a big 50-foot oval, completely white, with there was two lights on it. One was red, one was green. Either the red one was flashing and the green one was steady, or the red light was steady and the green light was flashing. And this thing angled up at 45-degree angle, and in blink of an eye, it was like a little moving star. You know?
That's fast.
So it's like, yeah, that fast. Now, I know of another report in Manitoba where the object was tracked on radar and reportedly going at 30,000 miles an hour. And when you have an object, yeah.
That's definitely a speeding ticket. Definitely a speeding ticket.
Definitely a speeding ticket. And on top of that, if they're able to even achieve a right angle turn at that speed, that is something we definitely cannot do. I don't care what anybody else says. We cannot do that.
Well, there is question of whether the Aurora can do that, but that's for a different topic on a different night. Michel, I'm going to get you to hold on. We are going to take a break here at the top of the hour. When we come back, we're going to get into crash sites, as you just mentioned. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. Our guest tonight is Michel Deschamps. His website is newforce.com. That's the Northern Ontario, make sure I got this right, Northern Ontario UFO Research and Study, NOUFORS.com. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Is the 24-hour world starting to wear you down? Let me from Rivulet Reiki and Ratings lend you a hand. Hi, this is Jolene, and if you're in need of Reiki or a room reading, come to my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr, and let us help you out. At Rivulet, I specialize in healing your body, mind, and soul, no matter where you are. And be sure to check out the Rivulet R&R Facebook page for your best deals. Remember, it's time for you to make some time for you.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where two members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio on the Spreaker.com network.
Do you believe you've been in contact with extraterrestrials? Have you seen the Greys, the Mantis, or the Reptilians? I am Samantha Mullet, and on the second Tuesday of each month, you can listen and learn from my experiences with off-worlders on Spaced Out Radio's The ET Experience. With host Dave Scott, we'll sit down and chat about what's going on with our friends from other worlds. We'll also try to answer your questions, so please tune in on the second Tuesday of the month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
With an ever-expanding listenership base, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you to advertise your product. Our listeners support those who sponsor this show. So whether you're an author or a company, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you. Our pricing is more than competitive, and your advertisements will be seen and heard every show. Head to spacedoutradio.com and advertise with us today. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com today.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on Spaced Out Radio. And we give it up to you guys, all the listeners, and the live listeners usually get something special and hang out in the chat room. And we love to have you. So we'll see you every Saturday night at 8 p.m. You know where.
If you're a fan of social media, you can follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel, where our archives are stored, is Spaced Out Radio Show. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much. If you're in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, shparanormalforum.net. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Uncle Jimbo, James Tyson, is in for Spaced Out Weekend the next couple of nights, while I pack my backpack, wander off into the wilderness to find my Zen, my Chi, maybe a run-in with Bigfoot. Maybe a UFO will stop by and say hello as well. I'm not too sure, but I will disappear and be back on Monday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. And you can also check out our archives on YouTube. Spaced Out Radio Show. Just click the subscribe button on that. I would appreciate that. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with Michel Deschamps. He is a UFO researcher out of Northern Ontario, Canada. His website, newfors.com. That's NOUFORS. I highly suggest you go to the site. Check it out. He's got a lot of good information and reports in there. We bring Michel on. You're battling a cold, but you're a real trooper tonight, my friend. I appreciate you being with us and our audience.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm doing my best.
You're sounding great. You're sounding great. A couple of coughs here and there, but that's okay. We can live with that. Cool. Hey, cool. Right before the break, we started chatting about crashes, UFO crashes. Yeah. We know about the one in Shag Harbor in 1967, which is very coincidental because it was 3 months to the date that former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer was in Alberta for the 100th anniversary of Canada, and they actually built in this Alberta town a landing pad for a UFO saying, hey, come on to Canada. We accept everybody, including extraterrestrials. And then 3 months later, the Shag Harbor incident happens in Nova Scotia, which would be the equivalent of Canada's Roswell. Since Shag Harbor, have we had any UFO crashes in Canada?
There's been a couple of interesting tidbits of information. I heard about, there's no details whatsoever about this, but I heard about a UFO crash in or near Owen Sound, which is between Sudbury and Toronto in 1954, but unconfirmed. The other thing that was pretty neat, and thank God, I have the audio track of this one. In the tar sands of Alberta, in the early 80s, they unearthed a black object that weighed about 2 tons, looked like it had the surface consistency of a golf ball, but with a tail at one end. And the workers that actually unearthed it tried to crack it open with a sledgehammer and couldn't do anything, including make a dent in it. And that's the last we heard of it. And I just happened to have my tape recorder, ghetto blaster at work at that time. I worked at the dealership at that time. And the broadcast came on and I got the recording. And that's all I got. It was in the early 80s or early to mid 80s, 85, I think. And I was blown away by the fact that they've been sifting through the tar sands, trying to basically get blood out of a rock. They're trying to get the oil from the sand to refine it, whatever. And here's this object that's buried there that they unearthed. So what the hell was it? And how long has it been there? I was fortunate enough in 1994 to speak with the only, at the time, a leading authority on UFO crash retrievals, Leonard Stringfield. He died of colon cancer in December of 94. I got to speak with him in November of 94. And, cause I was highly interested in some of the stuff that he uncovered. Landings during the Cambodian War, in the middle of a freaking firefight. And here's like some aliens gathering up body parts and then taking off. Well, hey, you want genetic material? Here's all these poor fallen soldiers all over the place. Who's going to have time to bury them if they're in the middle of a war, right? So here's their chance to take some genetic material that they need. And oddly enough, one of the objects seemed to have the same symbol on the side as what was seen by a police officer by the name of Lonnie Zamora in 1964, April, in Socorro, New Mexico. So you have similar looking object seen over like 2 different countries over a period of time, apart from each other. But crashes themselves, the information about them is far in between, except for the listing of 29 crashes worldwide. Is it 29 or whatever? I have this one particular page I created that lists all the crashes. You've got Dalnogorsk in Russia in 1989. You have Mauritius Bay off of Long Island in 1989 again. You have one crash that occurred in South Africa in 1989, possibly brought down by a military jet. You have the initial crash. The Roswell is only famous because it has the highest number of civilian witnesses to it. And that's all people look to, Roswell. But now there's Aztec, New Mexico, 1948. You've got Farmington, New Mexico, 1953, and so on. Kingman, Arizona, 1953 again. And people wondered, well, why so many crashes in the southwestern states? Well, those states, New Mexico, in the 40s in particular, but later on, I'm sure, it's where they have the highest concentration of military installations and secret labs. In the 40s, that's where they tested the V-2 rockets, so you had rocketry in that area. Plus, you had the first atomic bomb test in 1945. So if any alien race coming to this planet wanted to know about all technological achievements done at that time, New Mexico, southwestern states in particular, would have been the place to be. And if so many UFOs, such a high traffic of UFOs in that area, I'm not surprised that some of them unexpectedly crossed wires with this radar setup. Also, that was another thing too, is there was a very large array of radar installations. And maybe their ships were not geared to survive any radar beams sweeping across the countryside. So it would explain to me why there's so many crashes there. But it's not restricted only to the States. Crashes have occurred elsewhere, I'm sure. And so it's very hard to come across that information, good information, that has details as much as what Leonard Stringfield has collected. And so I tried to create a page that's sort of dedicated to his research, but as well listing and focusing on all these other crashes other than Roswell and Shag Harbor.
I'm curious to get your opinion on what happened in 2015. There was a supposed crash in Manitoba on the Jackhead First Nations Reserve. The military said they were doing a test of a crashed airplane and a military-type exercise. However, there are witnesses there that say they saw a UFO crash into the lake. Did you ever find any information on that? Because that got swept under the rug pretty darn quick.
Yeah, but also, I'm 50-50 about this particular case because I spoke to, maybe he's not the right person to talk to, Chris Rutkowski, which oddly enough is a skeptic, but also a researcher, because as a researcher, he puts out the annual survey. I don't know if we're still the only country to do so, but he puts out an annual survey of all the preceding year's sightings across the country, which just came out in April, this April. And he basically told me that there is nothing to the story. I've seen the CGI'd photos of UFOs on the ice, but at the same time, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch of my imagination, to think that the military are lying, because they're at these locations from the get-go. They're able to, they are trained, and they've become accustomed, even though crashes may be years apart. They must have a technical manual that describes on how to handle these things and how to do crowd control on the population. But at the same time, I tried to contact some of my First Nation contacts, and they haven't really said anything, because normally the First Nation people, regarding UFOs as the sky people, they would have opened up and said something if there was really something to this event. So I'm not sure one way or the other. I wish there was more First Nation people willing to come out and become whistleblowers. But, stories can just run like crazy, like wildfire, by having somebody create a UFO with CGI. You look at all the video footage on YouTube, for instance, I can pretty well tell which ones have been CGI'd and which ones I use my criteria, my list of what to look for. And there's some UFO footage that I've seen on YouTube that really piqued my interest, but there's other ones, CGI right off the bat. And it's a damn shame because those very same people who create the CGI don't know that UFOs have a very, very plain Jane shape. Very plain Jane. They don't have any structures sticking out of them. They don't metamorph in front of your eyes, necessarily. And so you can tell that those people have never seen a UFO because the stuff they're putting on CGI is something we'd find in science fiction film, but that Manitoba crash, to me, I'd stay 50-50 on it because there's much better cases that have more evidence, whether witnesses or physical evidence, than that particular case. It's going to become harder to discern what is real in terms of a UFO crash if we can't even get there, as first-hand witnesses. The military is going to have a cover on that, like, in no time flat.
Considering Canada is so vast and 95% of our population lives within 100 kilometers or 60 miles from the United States border, it really begs the question, how many UFOs have crashed up here that have never been found? Whether it's in the Arctic portions of the territories, whether it's in the northern parts of the province, from Newfoundland all the way to British Columbia. There could be crash sites around here that nobody knows about, and they've been sitting there for decades.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. There is one story I heard, and I'm trying to see if the lady would be willing to speak on record. We did so outside of a friend's place. I was visiting one of my friends' contact, First Nation person, and she introduced me to this lady friend of hers whose father is now deceased, but he was a general in the Canadian Armed Forces. And what she told me was there had been a UFO crash. I think it was either British Columbia. I'm not sure exactly where. And he had dealt with the shipment or the withholding of the occupant's body. And she had no bones about telling me the story, although we kind of talked about phone taps because my phone had been tapped like years before, in the 1990s. Things have been pretty quiet now. But she did say, well, they have gotten better. You don't hear the double clicks on the phone anymore when your phone's being tapped. And she had been followed because what she had done as a teenager was something that no teenager should have done, but she did. When her dad was away, when he was a general in the Canadian Armed Forces, she'd go in his office and snoop around and wondered what he was dealing with. And she found those UFO files. And so, later on, she got in trouble with her dad. And she said that she might have been followed for a few years after that. But, she left everything behind and she's now married. But even trying to withhold her anonymity, keep her name out of it, I'm going to try and see if I can at least get a recording of what she told me outside of my friend's house last summer or the summer before, because it's pretty big when you hear a story of a lady whose father was a general, a high-level general in the Canadian Armed Forces, had talked about a UFO crash and a body being sent for study somewhere. So it's like, wow. I'm not surprised because they've had the same thing happen in the States and elsewhere. There's one particular crash. I think it's either the Farmington, New Mexico crash or the Aztec, New Mexico crash. In one particular object, which was 100 feet diameter, they found 16 little bodies. So there's enough bodies to go around for different studies. One particular place, you might leave the skin totally intact for external studies. Another place you might actually do autopsies and dissections, actually, not autopsy, because an autopsy is usually to determine the cause of death. Well, in this particular case, they know it's a crash. They've had several crashes. They must know they're not doing autopsies, they're actual dissections. And that's why I'm one of the very few people who still believe that that alien autopsy of 1995 is real, because there's signs about it that was not known to the public at that time and still raises a lot of questions more than answers to me, even though it's been labeled a hoax and somebody came forth and just cried out that it's a hoax. Well, where's the proof that it's a hoax? I need just as much proof for a hoax as you need proof for a real case.
I have a question from you, or for you, from Roz in paranormalforum.net. He says, Michel, what do you think about smaller countries around the world opening up their UFO files?
I think it's great, because in a way, although it's not intended that way, it's probably going to put this, I don't even know if you can put the states to shame, but I was able to get my hands on 10,000 Australian files from the Australian archives. Then I managed to get the 9 downloads with the help of John Greenwald in California, the remainder of the 8 or 9 downloads that the UK provided for a limited time until they started charging a certain amount of pounds for downloading some PDFs. And I've always said, when it comes to this topic only, UFOs, documents should be in the public domain. No questions about it. Nobody should be sitting on top. Not one particular country or government should be sitting on those documents. It's what proves to the rest of us that we're not alone, never have been alone, and never will be alone. And I'm glad that those smaller countries like Brazil, France, Canada, because you know what? Chris Rutkowski and I are probably the only 2 people in the whole country actually I purchased 5 microfilm reels from the National Archives. And my copies, they don't have the names redacted or covered up. You see the names of the witnesses. I was able to find one document with my friend's name, Vincent Hickey. He's passed away. He was also 80 years old. He passed two Christmases ago. He passed away. He had lots of sightings. Reported only one to the radar base. And Don Campbell has 3 reports. I have 3 of his reports in those microfilm reels. And there's stuff from Ottawa and everywhere else, even off the Alaskan coast. So I'm glad, because in essence, it's letting the rest of the population know, if there's nothing to UFOs, why so many documents put together about them? It doesn't make any sense. And you look at the universe, even the night sky, there's no way in hell we're alone. No way. It's waste of space. If we're the highest thing that's out there, it's an insult to the notion of God.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree with you. What do you think, then, as we got a couple of minutes before we're going to go to a break here at the bottom of the hour, what would Canada's role be in disclosure, then? Is it something in your mind, and maybe this is too much to ask before we go to break, and we should maybe take this up right after the break here, because with us being the best friends and the largest unguarded border in North America here between Canada and the United States, there is some give and take politically in regards to anything from free trade to oil to water, fracking, whatever it is. That also includes defense forces like NORAD and NATO, of course, to protect what we have here in North America. Do you think, then, that pertains also to the disclosure movement?
Well, as my friends, excuse me, as my friends like to bring up more often than not, is that disclosure with a big D or a small d? I think we're certainly, like, for us researchers, I've heard the fact that we may be around to bridge the gap, because when all hell breaks loose, just like a bad murder case, the truth has a way of making it back to the surface. And this is such a big story. I don't care how much the military stands on the lid. This pot is overflowing. And once you open the floodgates, there's no way in hell that you can close them down. So this secret's going to come out one day, sooner or later. And people like myself, like yourself, we're going to be the bridge to help close the gap between the people who are going to be all panicky about this stuff, thinking that the aliens are here to conquer us and invade us. If that was the case, it would have happened a long time ago. You know? So disclosure, I'm not so sure anymore in what form it will take. But if the government don't come out and say something, the alien presence in our atmosphere is going to force their hand. Because one day, kind of like Independence Day, minus the conquering part of it, there'll be massive UFOs, big motherships hovering over all metropolitan areas, long enough, like weeks on end, long enough to hover in the sky. So everybody coming in from work or going into work will all of a sudden pull over and look up and say, what the hell? We've been lied to. And that's all it would take.
I know those exact same words. I've used them. I've used them myself. That's what happens when you have a triangle hovering over your house one night. It's just incredible. Michel, I'm going to get you to hold on for a break here at the bottom of the hour. We are talking with Canadian ufologist Michel Deschamps tonight. His website, I suggest you go check it out, newforce.com. That's NOUFORS.com. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be right back after this break.
Have you ever had an extraterrestrial experience? One you just couldn't explain? Well, maybe I can help. Hello. I am Samantha Mullet. On the second Tuesday of each month, I will join Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio to bring a human aspect to ET contact. It's something I've lived with my entire life, and I'd love to help you understand. Let's share our experiences. The ET Experience, the second Tuesday of each month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Fairies? Bigfoot? Dogmen? Trolls? Goblins? Hey, if it's cryptid in any way, I'm looking into it. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, also known as Spaced Out Radio's Crypto Guru. Join me every second Wednesday of the month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will talk about the stories people call tall tales. I will fill you in on the latest sightings and the hidden histories that are causing quite a stir. You can find everything at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Rivulet Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, rivuletrndr.wix.com/rivuletrndr, or my Facebook page, Rivulet R&R, to set up an appointment for relaxation, Reiki, or readings. No matter where you are, it's time for you to make time for you.
Looking for a place to get your product to the public? Advertise with us at Spaced Out Radio. At spacedoutradio.com, you can check out our pricing and packages that best suit your budgetary needs. Whether you're a budgeted author or a company looking to expand, our listeners support the products that support spacedoutradio.com. Advertising with us is an effective way to get your message out. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com and get your ads out today.
Are you an ET experiencer, but you just don't know what's going on? Are you too timid or shy to discuss it with anyone? Maybe I can help. Join me, R. Keith Andrews, the first Friday of every month on Spaced Out Radio, and I will help you to find the answers you're looking for. Together, I will help you understand the off-worlders and the true meanings behind your experiences. All you have to do is join us in the Spaced Out Radio chat room. See you there.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you'd like to hear on Spaced Out Radio? Let us know at spacedoutradio.com, where you can sign up to become a Space Traveler member today. Or you can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on our Facebook page, Spaced Out Radio Show. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. I am racing out after the show. Got my backpack packed, heading off into the wilderness, going to where no man has gone before. Find some trees and caves and go maybe a Wi-Fi signal so I can catch James Tyson on Space Out Weekend Saturday and Sunday night. I highly suggest you check it out as well. Thank you so much for being with us. If you're in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, Paranormal Forum, always a pleasure to have all of you with us listening to Spaced Out Radio. And if you're on SHR Media, our first of hopefully many syndicated radio stations out there, thank you so much for tuning in as well. We really appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can also find our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and on there you'll find our archives. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We are talking with Michel Deschamps tonight. He is an Ontario ufologist. His website, noufors.com, that's noufors.com. And we bring Michel back into Spaced Out Radio land for sure. And Michel, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, welcome. Welcome. I appreciate it.
I have a question from Paranormal Into the Night from Joe. You mentioned, Michel, weapons on UFOs in the beginning of the show. He has never heard anybody talk about weapons on a UFO. What do you know about them?
Well, some of the cases in Brazil, for instance, in the 50s in particular, like cigarette smokers like yourself, actually, would stop going outside lighting up cigarettes because UFOs, whoever their pilots are, the ones, especially the ones in Brazil, sometimes they would grab people using grappling hooks. Sometimes there'd be a red beam that would animate the person, and the green beam would actually be lasing through the flesh. One particular case in the 50s where a wife actually watched as her husband melted like a candle in front of her. And over time, people going outside for a smoke or whatever would stop going outside because the moment they'd be outside smoking a cigarette or whatever, the UFOs would swoop right down and try to grab them. The thing that I'm finding, which is really weird, is that it seems like the Earth has been divvied up in different sections by different alien factions. Like in Europe, you'll have the Nordiques-looking type, or Pleiadians. Some people call them the Pleiadians. They're the most human-looking of all the species. In Brazil, you have more the reptilian type that seem to be the more aggressive ones. In the States and Canada, you got the little grays. And then you got a variation. And that was another one idea that I had for the website, which was not being depicted anywhere else on any other website. I said, first of all, how many alien species or alien sketches of beings that were seen are there? And can I just separate them from the ones that are performing the abductions? So I've done that too. So using different books, like a large collection of books, including some of the stuff put together by Linda Howe. And the thing is, I had already done this stuff, like on the website, but I recently officially got her permission. So use whatever you have, you can grab from my books. But as long as you bring people back to my website, which is, like I said, her website, earthfiles.com. Because in her books, there was a lot of depictions, sketches made by witnesses of some of the beings that they encountered during abductions. But there's also the fact that in a lot of cases of landings, like 23% of the cases of landings worldwide, 23% included the sighting of the actual occupants next to the landed object. So I proceeded to create this one page where it listed 85 different species that were seen at one point. The military in the U.S. claimed they've cataloged 57 species. I have 85 plus one photograph of a real one, which was photographed by a police officer in Falkville, Alabama in 1973. And although the picture looks like a firefighter wearing one of those aluminum foil firefighting outfits, the photograph was taken at 10 feet, 20 feet, and 50 feet. And I have the actual photos that were sent to me by the lead researcher of that particular case in the States some years ago. We lost touch because before Skype, I was using a program called FireTalk, where you can actually, just strictly audio, you can actually communicate with anybody around the world free of charge. And this one person submitted these photos that they said to me, and I recognized right away. I mean, I was familiarized already with all the famous cases from the famous year 1973, which was the year of the humanoid. A lot of humanoid reports worldwide in 1973. Before that, it was 1954 in Europe. And I said, oh my God, that's the Falkville, Alabama photos taken by the officer. I can't readily think of his name right now, but so I have 85 sketches plus one photograph of the beings that are seen in close encounters of the third kind reports, but not the abduction ones. Those are on a separate page because I had to make a distinction because everybody's mixing everything in the same bag, and I have friends that do the same thing. And I was like, no, you got to separate the certain aspects. UFOs, the UFO phenomena has several facets. And so you have to be able to distinguish one from the other, from the other, from the other. When you put it together, it makes for one hell of a story. But when you investigate each aspects on an individual basis, you realize how much information there is pertaining to that one specific aspect of ufology or UFO research. There's another thing too, which is kind of funny. When you really think about it, if you exclude the probes, the small spheres that seemingly are the creators of the crop circles, we're basically studying somebody else's vehicles. It would be like a Vietnamese monkey in Vietnam War seeing a tank go by, a big tank, and say, what the hell is that? So we're basically studying other people's vehicles. And it kind of makes me laugh. I kind of wonder, you know how we have those fuzzy dices hanging from a rearview mirror in our cars? I wonder sometimes if the aliens don't have anything like that, like little tiny humans hanging from their rearview mirrors, you know? It's like we have stickers. If there's a cultural invasion of any kind that it pertains to aliens, it's all the stuff we have. We have bumper stickers. We have T-shirts. Alien faces everywhere. Of course, it's become a cultural icon. But who says, they must look at us like being, oh boy, we're really primitive and we're the stupidest race in the entire universe, which probably makes for a very interesting thesis if you're going to study a developing, primate civilization in trying to survive on its own, doing the stupidest moves like developing nuclear energy and not knowing how to dispose of it properly. All those things. So, so when you see it, you look at all these alien beings, you kind of wonder, how come a particular race is seen here and another race is seen there? I think they've got agreements amongst themselves to have, everybody gets to have what they want. But there's nothing insidious about it. My personal beliefs in all this since I started. I was born a Catholic, but I've totally rejected some stuff. But my religious beliefs have been altered in such a way where I believe that the Virgin Mary was artificially inseminated, which would explain why a virgin would still give birth to something or someone. I believe that Jesus, having the abilities that he had of able to walk on water, defy gravity, so to speak, was one of theirs. It just gets you thinking after a while that everything you've been taught in school may not be exactly accurate. If historians of the future were to go back now and write a history book, they would have so many missing chapters because their history as we know it is a lie. And it's been superimposed. The real history is gone. It's been superimposed by whatever the powers that be want us to know as history. And that includes UFOs. Oh, they don't exist. They're not real. And the occupants, well, you might have been smoking a little bit of weed or worse drugs that actually do make you hallucinate. I've never taken anything because I knew getting into this, I had to keep a straight head on my shoulders. And that's where I that's the path that I took. And so, the reports of occupant sightings, just like the crashes and landings, seem to have gone on the wayside. You don't hear too much about those now. It's mostly the crop circle, phenomena taking place. Landings are very rare. Occupant sightings outside of the abduction cases are very rare, although hopefully they're still occurring. It's really hard to keep on top of the story if the story is not being reported to you, the researcher. And that's why I'm always given heck. How come you don't know about this case? How come you don't know about that case? Well, if I was at that point at one time too, where I felt, oh goody, I know something that nobody else knows, and who cares? But then I realized, you stupid idiot, I said to myself, this information is meant to be shared, free of charge. You can make money, but money is not always going to be around. UFOs are. And the thing is, it needs to be shared. That's all you need. That's what you need to do in order to have everybody be on the same page. And I may not agree always with the UFO groups because they want to solve the mystery for themselves, or they sit on thousands of reports, which nobody gets to, they don't get to see the light of day. And if they do, well, good example is MUFON and Hangar 1. Hangar 1 has 8 episodes maybe? And I'm waiting for the next show that's supposed to come out of that. And they have 70,000 case files. What about the case about the fisherman who was abducted in his boat? And thanks to the GPS that he had on board, they realized, holy shit, this boat flew over land and he was found 2 hours later in a totally different lake. Those kinds of cases should be mentioned and brought to the forefront because that proves that there's something else going on that's not military. It's not the powers that be doing this. It's something that's keeping tabs on us. And the reason why I think this is all linked, like abductions, whatever, is because the other thing that I came to believe was that one particular faction of alien has had their hand in our creation. And the abductions is a way by which they monitor us, tweak us over time, maybe getting rid of some of our bad traits, and seeing what other stupid moves we're going to do next. And they have a rule of non-interfering until hopefully if something really gets bad and the shit really starts hitting the fan, then they'll intercede and say, whoa, as a civilization, you cannot survive if you're divided. Civilizations don't survive by having the rich become super rich and the poor becoming super poor, and there's a division there. I'm sure the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans thought the same way. And where are they now? And UFOs were flying back then too. So I think this is an awakening. It's something that can actually propel us in the future, where we realize that we are better than this, and that we have a more important purpose than screwing each other over for the piece of the action. And that includes staying on top of documents and not mentioning it to other people because, oh, I know something you don't. And who cares? So I've changed that mindset that I had, and I realized, okay, so my website's not making any money, and I don't care. I got a full-time job aside from this. I'm not afraid to say it. I work at Walmart. I work at Walmart unloading trucks, but I don't have property of Walmart. I've been doing UFO research long important. I realize now I thank my dad every day that the place he picked to move the family to was a UFO hotspot.
You mentioned about 80 plus different ET species that you have recorded on. How did you gather those? And are those species here for research? Are they benevolent? Are they malevolent? Fill us in.
Well, as far as I can tell, I think they're all benevolent. There may be a few, like I said, the reptilian types seem to be very aggressive. The sketches I got mostly from different collections of books, like especially encounters with occupants, UFO occupants from Europe, Australia, South America, the States, Canada. And those cases are very rare. Well, they weren't rare for a particular time because in the 50s, there was a lot of cases of landings in France, and people would see the 4 occupants on the main road leading to the city. But I'd be willing to bet 100 to 1 that there's still races that are making it here for the first time. Now, whether or not they share information and say, hey, come over here, we've got this primitive race that's in full existence and developing. But there must, I don't know, I'm sure there's some creatures that, I think the last report I heard, well, in Quebec anyways, there was a case that I translated the article from French to English so that English Canada could hear about it. It was just outside of Montreal where this lady was taking her shower. And when she got out, she noticed this brown glow outside, and she saw 2 small occupants in her field. And when she went and checked the land the next day, there was pod marks, like holes into the ground where the consistency of the soil was different than the consistency of the soil around the site. And those particular beings, that's the shape that they had or the outfits they were wearing, was only seen maybe once or twice before. In France in 1954, and another case somewhere else, I think it was Italy. I'm sure some of them are making it here for the very first time. If they've obviously had more than enough practice in being a spacefaring civilization than we have. I laugh at the military for being the top honchos and think, well, we can go and conquer this, we can go and explore that. I'm just hopeful. Whether, like you talked about, I think you covered a series of shows on the secret space program. I hope to God that the military is not going somewhere out there tickling the dragon's belly. Because if the reality was that there were races out there that were just as vicious and conquering as the Klingons, and somehow they follow one of those other particular races back to Earth, we would be easy pickings for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want us to be put in that position where we're becoming easy pickings for a race that couldn't care less about ravaging another one. And the military think they're all that, but I don't think they're all that at all. And that's dangerous. You know?
I have a question from Lynn in Paranormal Forum, and I think I have this same question going on in my head when she typed it out. Yeah. You mentioned, Michel, that you believe that all of the species are benevolent. That is a very huge assumption, considering there is a lot of people out there who are having negative ET experiences.
Yeah. Well, that may be because, for the simple fact that we haven't been prepared. We were lied about the alien presence since the get-go. And the thing is, we would have been, like, I know the UFOs are flying around. I don't walk day in, day out looking over my shoulder out of fear. I am more afraid of our government than I'm afraid of the aliens. I would have to see a lot of evidence that would indicate to me that there's something malevolent about here. Some of the bad experiences that people have had is the simple fact that for anybody, being taken against your will is a no-no. And I agree with that. But if we're some type of genetic source of material where they're here to help themselves get better by using the genetic material from compatible bipeds, and we have to sustain a little bit of psychological trauma or whatever, yeah, maybe they could do it in an easier way without traumatizing people and making it look like it's a negative experience instead of a positive one. I am not sure. I mean, there's got to be a reason behind it. And maybe if we understood the full gamut of the reasons, maybe we'd then think about it and say, well, okay. Or, no, it's not okay. But we obviously have no powers over these beings with the abilities that they have and their vehicles to do the stuff that they do. Sometimes I do wish that there was a God that would intercede and say, okay, enough is enough. I'm putting my foot down. Well, that's when I put the question, if there is a God, where the hell is he? Because if I had a creation as beautiful as this planet and the human beings on the surface of that planet, I would not want anything of that magnitude to take place that would disrupt the everyday life of these beings. There is times I wish I had the innocence of my coworkers who have never seen anything and they think I'm whacked. I wish I had that blissful ignorance sometimes. But then I don't know what I can say to that about, if there's nothing mean or malevolent with these beings, how come the experiences are so traumatic or invasive or, I wish I had the answers to that. That's why anybody claiming to have a lot of answers, I think, is full of BS. With this phenomena, we don't have all the answers. If we had all the answers, I wouldn't be doing the research that I'm doing or creating the web, or other people have written books. We're all trying to get at the bottom of this, and we may never, with our small primate brain, ever get to the bottom of this. Because these beings may be millions of years old, if not just hundreds of thousands of years old. If one particular race has a lifespan of 340 to 400 Earth years, I mean, you can do a lot in that in that number of years, in that existence. Compared to us, we're lucky enough to live up to 100. Mm-hmm. So, I wish I knew the answers. Maybe it's something we won't like. Maybe it's part of the reason why this is being kept hush-hush. I doubt that anybody anywhere knows the entire full story, the reason why. But maybe it's something we don't want to know.
We are talking with Michel Deschamps tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He's a Canadian ufologist working out of Northern Ontario. His website, noufors.com. That's newfors.com. If you want to check it out, he's done some great research that you can check out over there. Over 1,000 pages he has added to that website, so there's plenty of information to go through. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We're going to be right back, right around the corner.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy, from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
With an ever-expanding listenership base, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you to advertise your product. Our listeners support those who sponsor this show. So whether you're an author or a company, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you. Our pricing is more than competitive, and your advertisements will be seen and heard every show. Head to spacedoutradio.com and advertise with us today. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Is the world starting to wear you down? Let me from Rivulet Reiki and Readings lend you a hand. Hi, this is Jolene, and if you're in need of Reiki or a realm reading, come to my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr, and let us help you out. At Rivulet, I specialize in healing your body, mind, and soul, no matter where you are. And be sure to check out the Rivulet R&R Facebook page for your best deals. Remember, it's time for you to make some time for you.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month, where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. We are into the third hour and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're on SHR Media, thank you for tuning in. If you're in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night or Paranormal Forum, keep your questions coming. If you want to call in and talk to myself or Michel, you can do so at 702-302-4556. That number, once again, 702-302-4556 is the number to call if you want to ask your UFO questions to either myself or our guest tonight, Michel. Michel's website is newfors.com, Noufors. We're going to bring him on here momentarily. I do want to remind you beforehand that Uncle Jimbo James Tyson heads up to floor number 13 to broadcast Spaced Out Weekend here in the cabin on Saturday and Sunday night. I will wander off over the wilderness. I got about 58 minutes before I disappear into the trees, up the mountain, try and find a nice cave to relax in, catch my zen, maybe a good Wi-Fi signal. It's kind of good. It's kind of real good. We're having a lot of fun with this. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, we can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. All our archives are on YouTube. Our channel is Spaced Out Radio Show. Please hit the subscribe button on that. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. We're about to bring in Michel Deschamps once again here on Spaced Out Radio. He's battling a little bit of a cold, so please forgive him for that. You know, this stupid cold, it's been going around everywhere for the past couple of months. Seems to be getting a resurgence, too. I'm glad it's staying out of my area here in the boonies of British Columbia. Let me ask you this. This question for you, Michel, comes from Roz in Paranormal Forum. Do you believe, Michel, that Hollywood is conditioning us for the best and worst of UFOs and alien contact?
Yeah, I do. Although I kind of laugh. Well, I kind of laugh, yeah, when I've seen the aliens films and I see something like that. I say, if we were to encounter races like that, we'd be done for. And no question about it. But the funny thing with Hollywood is that, like for the Travis Walton case, for instance, when they did Fire in the Sky, they didn't want, well, actually, the beings that he saw were different. If you looked on my website, Travis's occupants that he saw on board the UFO, he saw the two different, like Hollywood didn't even mention the fact that he had seen human types as well as the little white chalky pasty ones. The ones he saw weren't great because I actually spoke to Travis Walton before the movie came out, asking him how he was going to deal with the reporters, because some of them still believed that his story was fake. And all he told me was he was bracing himself for the onslaught. When you look at it, and I asked him about the skin texture of the beings that he saw, and you remember when he pushed one back, it felt like marshmallow, like almost like fresh bread dough, where you put your fingerprints in there, and eventually your fingerprints come back up and they disappear. And when you ran his hand down the one arm, it was smooth as glass, but as soon as you went up the other way, it was like scales. So there's something there that is pretty interesting. But Hollywood didn't do that. Didn't cover all those, the fact that he had seen human appearing beings and depicting the right color and the right type of being compared to these little brown-skinned, wrinkly little men that they depicted in the movie. They have a tendency of doing that a lot, where the beings that are being seen, especially in abduction cases, are recurring over and over again. They'll create something totally out of thin air because they don't want to use the same model over and over again. Now, for the aliens movies, something that bleeds acid, that can burn through any metal, and I mean, you hear the stories about what happened at the Roswell site, where 4 of the attendants that actually handled the body, they soon later died of unknown causes. So you kind of wonder, encountering something from another world may have its bad side effects. But to see all the depictions of evil aliens in Hollywood and stuff, maybe that's what's generating either skepticism or the simple belief that, if there's aliens out there, I hope they never find us because they could be really bad. And then we'd have no defenses against it, And I believe that too. I mean, whatever we've got as weapons, you could train it on certain UFOs, but you couldn't knock them all out of the sky like you see in the movies. So it's a false image of what reality would be like all around. But I'm glad that there's documentaries being made as well. And I wish they would bring more documentaries or docudramas to the forefront, depicting a closer to reality image of what it's like by listening to people that have seen UFOs or encountered the beings, has been at crash sites. But, it's entertaining as well. And we seem to be full of different things that entertain us. So we're distracted from what's really going on behind the scenes. We got cell phones, we got hockey games, baseball, all these things, just like back in the Roman times when they had the Roman games, the gladiators. And while the people were entertained watching that, the politicians were doing stuff that they couldn't even have thought of, like stealing money or whatever, becoming richer. So it's all diversionary, and it's fun for a while, but when you realize maybe what's the underlying reason, what it's there for, then you realize, you wish there was more reality-based stuff compared to the Hollywoodized, bastardized, created stuff.
Bill Cardwell in Paranormal Into the Night. We got to watch out for him because he's a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Still bleeding blue from 1967.
Oh.
Bill is asking, do you think that even if full disclosure was to happen, that the average person would believe it after so many years of false stories by the government and militaries around the world?
Oh, that's a good question, because what's been shocking me lately is the fact that people are doubting that we even went to the moon. And there's actually a guy at work. I thought for sure he was joking, but apparently not. He believes the earth is flat. The earth is flat, and he wants me to get him a real picture of the earth from space or from the moon that's not been CGI'd. I said, you know what? NASA has doctored film, but it's basically to take UFOs out of the pictures. See, people thought the pictures are being fed directly from the moon shots down to Earth, but they're being processed at the NSA office, where there's a team that is there specifically to remove any anomalies from the photos before they're sold to the public. That, and the combination of that plus the movie Capricorn 1, which was the fake landing on Mars and then subsequent murder of the astronauts who they couldn't let out because they would have told the story that everything was faked and shot at a studio. That is what I think got people believing that the entire Apollo mission was faked. So to go back to your question, I think that there's still going to be people that won't believe that aliens are real, no more than the 5% of the population who still think we never went to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Or
flat Earth. I'm not buying that one. I'm not buying the flat Earth thing. I do want to have someone on about that, but that's one I shake my head over a little bit. Karen in the Spaced Out Radio chat room wants to know, because of all your ET experiences and research that you do, what kind of blood type do you have? Are you RH?
As far as I know, I'm not. No. And I've never been abducted, and I've never seen the occupants. All I've seen was UFOs and things that definitely would not fall within the category of man-made objects or astronomical, because I've looked at the sky since I was a young kid, and I'm not into sports. I'm not inside watching Monday Night Football. I'm outside playing and looking at the sky. And once I started seeing UFOs, a lot of times when I least expected it, my eyes got opened, I was awakened, but yeah, it's been said before, you've had so many sightings, you must have been abducted. I said, I'm so meticulous at looking at time. I think in my entire existence, I think there's only one day that I totally lost, and I don't know why, but I never took drugs. I had my thyroids removed because of a non-cancerous tumor in 1986, so I take pills for that. But I never smoked pot, never did any of the drugs. I have lower back problems, and I said, well, I have enough problems, physical problems. I don't need anything else. And to deal with UFOs and then to report to the public and the media what I've learned, I need to be totally there. 100%. Physically, mentally, intellectually. And I don't know. All I know is that it's changed me. And because the floodgates have been opened, I can't shut them back. I can't. There's no way. And I have stopped sky watching per se. Like, I haven't even created a group yet. There's mention of starting a group that goes out and sky watches. But I leave it to the skeptics to have their own sighting, because I've had enough sightings. I know they're there. I don't doubt it anymore. And maybe that one day that'll change for everybody else. But I'm sure there'll be people in the wings that will be totally skeptical against all that. Just like, yeah.
Have you ever seen an alien?
No, but I know someone who has. Like I said, my friend from Inco, he encountered one in 1975. I have the audio story. Actually, if you go on my audio clips page, the very first picture there is Don Campbell. He worked at Inco. There's a couple interesting stories where him and his wife were coming back from his mother's place for supper. This is 1975. He was building his new home. There was only 3 homes there at that time. Now it's all high-level doctors and Inco retirees that live in that. And everything's named after spatial objects. He lives on Telstar Avenue. There's a Telstar satellite. There's Galaxy Court. So he lives in that area. And coming back home, here comes this fancy-looking car, like 1975. But this car just looked like it's out of place. And behind the wheel is this creature with what looked like a wig on its head, gloves on its hands, because you could see the hands on the steering wheel. But the car has got a really weird, eerie white glow to it. And it doubled back. It followed them back up the hill towards where they were building their house. And he was bowling with a couple of police constables and their wives. And he was also calculating in the lumber that he needed for his house to be built. So he took down this license plate number that was on this vehicle that he saw. And he walked outside of his own car, could not hear a sound coming off the engine. His wife almost passed out, so he went around quickly to catch his wife in his arms as this vehicle passes by. The creature behind the wheel turned its head like a robin, looking at them. And apparently his wife received a telepathic message, and she fainted. He wanted to chase after it, but she says no. It says we heard of all the abduction stories and whatever. Anyways, he says, well, I can't mention the alien stuff in the car to the police officer friends. So he says, I'll come up with a story that a drunk driver got into my lane. So he gives them the license plate number. They did a complete background check in 1975. FLA 600 did not exist as a license plate number. And so that was one story. The other one, as I mentioned earlier, him and the only guy from work that actually believed him saw this UFO hovering a few hundred yards, few hundred feet away, I guess, whatever. And he has a 600 power telescope. And he zoomed right into one of the portholes. And on board the craft, he saw 5 beings. 4 were dressed in silver. The 5th one was dressed in black. He assumed was the leader. Behind them was control panels with all these lights flickering off and on. But the beings were standing. And he saw that. And he watched it. And he says, my buddy was almost swallowing his cigarette when he was watching that. And now those 2 stories are on audio, on my audio clips page. And he has seen stuff where one UFO, 2 UFOs took their time, one after the other, sucking up power off the power lines. And that is another case where who's left to pay for the damn bill? You and I are left to pay for the bill. These UFOs, it's known by Hydro, and I don't care which province you're from. Mm-hmm. They know that UFOs come down and suck power right off the power lines. And then we're left with the bill.
I had a guest named Jim Thomas on a couple of months ago, and very often he actually sees UFOs coming to the power lines right by his house, and like they're refueling. I will say this: I have seen personally 5 extraterrestrials.
Lucky.
The first one I saw was at 2:00 in the afternoon, 5 days after I had the UFO landing experience. And I will never forget that 10 to 12 footer as long as I can live. He was about 200 feet in front of me. And I was with a friend of mine. The beauty of my experiences, 99% of them, I've actually had witnesses to it.
Lucky.
I actually woke up on the table while I was abducted. And I had 3 little gray dudes working on me. They were kind of good. I know first-time listeners probably listen up. Yeah, that sounds like he's full of crap. But if you've listened to this show long enough, I've given that. And probably the weirdest one, we just had the 1-year anniversary for. I was broadcasting on this show on April 20th, 2015, when I saw something out the window kind of catch my eye. And my guest was answering the first question of the night. I put my microphone on mute. I turn and look out the window, and there is this giant gray head with the big black eyes staring at me. It was absolutely a phenomenal experience because I damn near fell out of my chair. I invited him down, and the people who were here the other night listening in, I actually invited him. I put it out to the universe. Hey, why don't you come back for a reunion sighting? And unfortunately, he didn't make it. You know, at least he could have sent one of those sorry I can't make it cards, but he didn't do it. You know, it's just the way it is sometimes. Roz has a question. Says maybe that is the UFO version of an electric car / spaceship in the story you were just telling.
You never know. I mean, who's to know what if like Don used to think maybe they were powering themselves up because he didn't see the mothership. I mean, the one UFO came down, sucked the power off the lines for about 15 minutes, and the lights all like he was I've been to the rock, like, well, it's very rocky around here. And he was at a very highest point where he could actually see the lights in New Sudbury, because there's Old Sudbury and New Sudbury, as they call it. And he could see the lights dim. And then that UFO took off, went straight up 5 miles up and parked itself next to the other one. And then the other one comes down and sucks power for 15 minutes. And at that point, all the lights went out and he could see all this. So he's not sure if they were just helping themselves to the electricity or if eventually they were bringing the energy back to their mothership or whatever. Because obviously these small ships, I think the small ships are brought here by a larger craft, even though you may not see the larger craft. It's like those F-4 Phantoms over Vietnam. They didn't fly all the way there from the States. They were brought over with aircraft carriers. So I think the smaller craft, 40, 50 foot across, they don't come here all the way from out there on their own. But who's to say what the electricity is for? I mean, there's so many cases of that, like cars being stalled. You know, there's the famous Levelland, Texas event of 1957. There is one document I mentioned off the coast of Alaska where there was I don't know if it was a naval ship or just a regular vessel, but a UFO hovered over the ship and all the lights went out. The ship went dead. And then as the UFO leaves, power comes back on. Same thing happened to a house in Hanmer, north of Sudbury, where I grew up most of my life in the valley, which is north of Sudbury. And one of the documents I have, the witness was long gone by then. I couldn't actually talk to him, and his daughter had no idea about it. But I tracked him down with the document, using the document, and he had actually seen the UFO come close to the house. The lights would all go out. The UFO moves away from the house. The lights come back on. So it's like, it's pretty amazing technology. And that probably would explain, if we could find a way to reverse that, where people are saying, how come you don't get footage of the UFO and the aliens as they come to abduct you? Well, they knock everything out within range. You know, your video camera, your lights. So if there is a way to reverse that so that the opposite takes place, people would probably get evidence that way. Footage of the actual beings coming in or the UFO hovering over their house. Who knows? But it's pretty well interesting. It's amazing stuff. Because we can't fly over power lines and take power off the lines, get electrocuted right off the bat. So, you know, technology is amazing. And that's why I don't even think you can duplicate it. We could talk about Bob Lazar and Area 51, and I swear, I believe him. I believe him hands down. And when he says you can't duplicate the technology, you can't. It's made with materials and alloys that are produced in space or a zero gravity. Stuff here, we're lucky to produce something with man-made materials, but it will not have the consistency or the durability that this metal or whatever they have that they put their ships together with and propels them across space. We can't duplicate. So, you know, we're smart, but we're not that smart.
I have a question from Roz in Paranormal Forum. He is asking, Michel, what do you think in the movies accurately portrays aliens? Is it something like Whitley Strieber's movie Communion or The Fourth Kind?
Actually, of all the movies I've seen that were based on an actual story, my preference is the UFO incident, the Betty and Barney Hill story. Whitley Strieber, I saw Communion, I have it. Yeah, the beings he encountered were kind of different, especially the blue-skinned one with the little parkas. But not to say that it's never happened to somebody else before. You know, there's similarities, but there's differences at the same time. Travis Walton's story, the Fire in the Sky movie, the rendition was not as accurate. So far, the one movie that stuck to the actual story was the Betty and Barney Hill story. The movie was made in 1975, and it was called The UFO Incident. And I wish they had more. I wish they had more productions that actually would be based on more than based, because usually they say based on this or based on that. Yeah, but how much? what's the percentage of the actual film that's based on an actual account? You know, I remember the TV miniseries Intruders, which I also have. And there was a composite from actual abduction cases. I would like to see more stuff based in like on real cases with the evidence being shown, because that's where the lack is. I think people will, UFOs here and there, yeah, you think you saw one, but then who talks about physical evidence, you know, like landing sites and stuff? We're still hoping that that Ted Phillips will write a book about that. So far, he's the leading authority on, just like Leonard Stringfield was a leading authority on crash retrievals. Ted Phillips is the leading authority on UFO landing trace cases, and he has yet to write a book about all the stuff he's investigated. And so who's going to pick up the baton after he's gone? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's the same thing with Leonard Stringfield. Nobody else is looking. Well, Scott Ramsey's looking, and his wife are looking into the Aztec. Well, I just bought the book not too long ago. Aztec, 1948 Aztec UFO crash. But then there's all these other ones, like I said before, Kingman, Arizona, Farmington, New Mexico, Dalmagorsk, Russia. Then you got the famous landing at Voronezh, Russia in 1989. There's so much stuff, you know, we need to present more of the physical evidence, because that would clinch it for a lot of people. That something left a weird mark where the consistency of the soil is different. The analyses have been done, and they still come up, you know, like, what the hell caused this? So
we're going to hop out for a break at the bottom of the hour here. It is our final break of the night. When we come back, we're going to talk about intriguing UFO stories that Michel Deschamps has covered. Your questions continue as well. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be right back after this break.
Looking for a place to get your product to the public? Advertise with us at Spaced Out Radio. At spacedoutradio.com, you can check out our pricing and packages that best suit your budgetary needs. Whether you're a budgeted author or a company looking to expand, our listeners support the products that support spacedoutradio.com. Advertising with us is an effective way to get your message out. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com and get your ads out today.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit. And expect a miracle.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. On Spaced Out Radio. And we give it up to you guys, all the listeners, and the live listeners usually get something special and hang out in the chat room, and we love to have you. So we'll see you every Saturday night at 8 p.m. You know where.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
The last Monday of the month on Spaced Out Radio is a night of psychic vision, mediumship, UFO and ET contact, Bigfoot stories, animal communication, and so much more with me, Elizabeth Anglin. I'd love it if you would join host Dave Scott and I on the myriad of topics we delve into. Every month, we share new views that may help you understand your own experiences. So tune on in at spacedoutradio.com and stamp your cosmic passport.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Missed most of tonight's show? Don't worry, you didn't miss a thing. You can head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and download our archives for free. And don't forget to get your Space Travelers membership today. Now, back to tonight's show. Welcome back to the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Have my bags packed, heading out for the weekend, wandering off into the wilderness to find my Zen, my Chi, maybe a good Wi-Fi signal so I can tune in to Spaced Out Weekend with Uncle Jimbo, James Tyson, on Saturday and Sunday night. It's very, very good radio on the weekend, much like having a cup of coffee by a warm fire. Check out Uncle Jimbo if you've never heard him before. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow us on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio Show. Please click the subscribe button to that, and that way we get to make like a penny off of that. We're getting rich here. That's where all our archives are, on YouTube. Our Instagram account is Dave Scott SOR. I want to pass a quick shout-out to Kathy Hook Fisher, who takes care of all our live tweeting and Instagram posts for Spaced Out Radio. She does a magnificent job. Thank you so much, Kathy. We really do appreciate your time for doing that. Our website, once again, spacedoutradio.com, if you want to check us out and see what's happening on a week-to-week basis. Our guest tonight for the final half hour is Michel Deschamps. His website, newfors.com. That's spelled Noufors. We're talking UFOs. Action here in Canada. I do have a question, Michel, as we bring you back in. This comes from Alaska Cog, and he is asking, what do you think about Whitley Strieber's books and the new television series on Sci-Fi called Hunters? Those really show that the extraterrestrials are a wicked, malevolent bunch.
To be honest, I haven't even seen it. But like I said before, I have my own reservations on whether or not it'd be good for us to be exploring in space right now. Like I said, tickling the dragon's belly. Because what if there are races out there that couldn't care less about us being no more than lab rats, and that they had nothing to do with our creation, so they're not here for that. They just do other things because, like our own scientists, they believe, oh, we can do it. Let's do it. Never mind the ethics, scientific or otherwise. So I wouldn't be surprised if we humans are like that. Then there's a whole gamut of different possibilities that some aliens may not be as benevolent as the rest of them. Or, I just hope to God that maybe there's got to be... I want to know which way is up and which way is down. Right now, we're like swimming in a sea of unknown, and we got nobody that comes out of space, lands, and comes right out and tells us this is what is and this is what isn't. And that's what we need to know. You know, I guess it depends also on the person's point of view. I mean, I've never been abducted, so taken against my will or whatever like that. So I would take offense to something like that happening to me for sure. And I would probably regard it as being negative. I just wish maybe there's a universal law out there that prohibits one civilization from abusing another. Because in a lot of reports, basic UFO reports as well as abduction reports, some of them have resulted in suicides. Some of them have resulted in divorce. And in some rare cases, a few of them, UFO encounter has resulted in death, which is not mentioned very often. And so there's too many questions and not enough answers. And like I said before, we may not like the answers that we get from the horse's mouth if they were to ever show up and tell us what is and what isn't. I'm not going to turn to the military for answers because they may be scratching their heads as well. With all the technological achievements, you know, building a tank and the Aurora fighter or plane is way different than some object that can split into 5 and then rejoin. We don't have technology that can do that. We don't have technology that can allow us to go into water and come back up and then go into space from that vantage point. There's too many answers, not enough questions. Too many questions, not enough answers. And people will ask me, well, for instance, with my website, how come you don't have any modern pictures of UFOs or whatever? Is because the pictures that I have on there, they've been tested and analyzed to death, and they had negatives with them. Modern day pictures, digital photos, can be doctored. Now, unless I know the actual person who's taken photos themselves, they won't be posted. If it's somebody I know, you know, and I trust, and there'd be no reason for me to doubt them, I would post their pictures. But basically, the information that's on my website is old stuff. A lot of it is not my own, and it needs to be shared. My mom used to tell me I should make money off of this and sell this stuff. I said, most of this stuff is not mine for sale, to sell. And the documents, whether you can make money off of them or not, maybe everybody should have a right to make money off of them. The document should be public domain anyway. In a nice binding, I could sell them and you know, and what they are and where they came from. And I'm maybe thankful that I've never encountered alien beings, good or bad, because that would be the extra shock that would propel me over the precipice. Maybe right now I'm relatively safe because I haven't had that much of a close encounter. The closest UFO I saw was probably 500 yards, maybe less. But never interacted with me. He just did a flyby. If something closer, I've met people that have become my friends who have had a closer or more intense sighting, and it shook them to their core, and they became an instant believer. I hate the word believer. I say you believe when everything you know is based on faith, but once you've seen a UFO, you're no longer a believer. You're a knower. You know those things are real. It's not a belief system like religion. At all. Not at all. It's not the same. I've been told that 20 times there. It's making me sick and tired and frustrated. And that's why I created the website.
Michel, what is your take on crop circles? Do you think they're naturally made, man-made, or extraterrestrial made?
I think they're extraterrestrial made. The man-made ones, I tried as much as possible, given the information I was able to get from different sources, I want to show what is man-made and what are the telltale signs and what's the sign with the real ones. And people tend to forget that the real circles, first of all, the majority of them are real, and they're created within seconds. Because there's one piece of film where a snowflake formation was filmed being created, and it took seconds. And the very same guy or a researcher that saw the footage thought for sure that somebody had used a morphing program on the computer. And yet the pattern was there the next day. And these little tiny spheres of light maneuvered, not exactly where the branches would be created off a snowflake. But whoever's doing this is not from this planet. The people that are doing it, the fakers, the hoaxers, the plants will be damaged, they'll be kinked, people will have stepped on, there'll be cigarette butts because you're spending hours doing this in the dark. Most of the crop circle, if not all of them, are created at night. And some places, there's no way they'd be created there. It wouldn't make any sense. People would be spotted doing them. I always said, if the aliens are actually listening to some of these people who say, well, I'd like to see another one being made. Well, let's hope there's one that is made that will cover so many pastures, so much land, that somebody, like a scientist, will be able to calculate that, hey, this could not have been made in one single night. It would have taken 4 nights and 3 days to create because it's so large. You only need one of those like that. And that would close the story right there as them being man-made or whatever. And they have had some really large patterns. They're so complex. They look almost like an optical illusion or 3D effect. And like I said, I always said to my friends, they can mostly, all of them, be appreciated from the air. So somebody's directing the designers. They're doing it from the air. And, but they're being done really fast. There's a pilot that flew from one little town in England, flew for 15, 20 minutes over this piece of land. There was nothing there. Came back 20 minutes later. Huge freaking pattern was in the same field where he had just flown over. And there was nobody there. So the skeptics or the debunkers will tell you a majority of them are fake. But I think it's the opposite. I think there's less than 1% that are hoaxes. And the majority of them are all real. And if you look at the evidence, the fact that the plants are magnetized, which is an impossibility, the consistency of the soil has changed. There's a sound that emanates from the center of the circles. One particular circle in Manitoba, they found a flattened porcupine with the quills in a spiraling fashion as if it had been caught during the formation of the circle. Now, you can't do that. In one pattern in Ontario, they found dead rats, and a horse would not go into the pattern. And a blind woman actually could sense some kind of energy emanating from the circles. Cell phones won't work inside of a crop circle. Tractors will shut down. So there's all these weird high strangeness thing that will take place that ought to make people think, wait a minute, this is not man-made. We don't have that kind of capabilities to create a pattern in the soil, in a grass field or whatever, that could knock out the power out of your vehicle or something. It doesn't make any sense.
One of the things that I find interesting about the crop circles is when the debunkers get out there and try and, say that these are man-made, you never see any paths out of them. They're not by a tractor path. They're not by a walking path or anything like that. There never seems to be anything like that for evidence. And like you mentioned, how quickly they seem to pop up. It's amazing. With the designs that are created, do you believe then that the designs of the crop circles are some sort of communication or some sort of pattern that is able to direct energy towards where these ETs and UFOs are supposed to go?
I think they could be both. Some of the patterns, they may have like mathematical signs. I remember when I saw the mathematical sign for chaos was a big Mandelbrot that had been created. There's also these things that Linda Howe calls ratchets, which seem to have pi 3.14 each time you do half a circle or whatever. Like, I'm not really good at math. Actually, I'm really lousy at math. But there's definitely something very complex. And initially, yeah, some of the patterns were made where there was track lines close by. So then people thought, well, maybe that's how they got there. But then now the patterns are actually in a field that's never been touched by anything. And so how do you explain that? It's almost akin to this physical trace that I investigated on Manitoulin Island. And I have the pictures on my physical trace cases page. And it's Spring Bay, Ontario. And somebody said, well, that's somebody with a snow machine that made donuts or a three-wheeler. I says, okay, that's fine. But wouldn't it make sense to put that thing near the well-traveled road where people could see it, rather than a quarter mile into the bush, which is completely surrounded by trees and unseen by the traveling cars going by? That didn't make any sense at all to me. So the same thing with crop circles, I guess. People would be spotted. I mean, some of the patterns are so large and so complex. I don't know. It's amazing how they're done so quick, and yet there's purpose behind them. But whether or not we're smart enough to decipher them or not, who knows? Maybe they're just throwing stuff at us, hoping that one of the symbols will catch our eye and say, "Oh, I know what that is." Apparently, they had one message they got in the field, and it was in response to a message we had sent out on Voyager 1 or Voyager 2. I might have been Pioneer, I'm not sure. And the response was brought back in a crop pattern near a radio telescope in England. And it was very specific. And it's like, wow. So, but it was in the story, in the media for a little while, and then it just went dead. Like everything else related to the subject goes dead real quick. And I always try, every 2 to 3 years, I'll write a letter to the editor so that the UFO story always stays alive in my community, if not elsewhere. Because this is so important. You know, it could be the one thing that saves us from our own self-annihilation. Because if we think we're the only ones out here in space, then people automatically think, well, it's free for all. We can screw each other over for the piece of the action and nobody else has got any say-so. But what if that's not how civilizations survive? What if there's a new way or a better way to do things where everybody thrives and not survive? You know, we should be thriving on this planet, not surviving. We're the only species who pays rent on this planet. The planet does not belong to us. We belong to it. And the First Nation people know that. And the rest of us ought to know that too. We're supposed to be caretakers of this planet, and we've done a really bad job of it. So sometimes I welcome the aliens in taking over this planet and have a welcome to it, because they could probably bring it back to its pristineness that we somehow have done away with.
Either that or we are their greatest reality TV show going on right now. It's one of the two. You know, do you believe then that they are sitting up there, and I'm being very hypothetical right now, because there's a lot of researchers who believe that there is an ET council that watches over Earth to make sure that there is, you know, nothing bad happening, that we're not blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons, and if we were about to, they would step in and not allow us to do that. Have you ever heard those theories, and what is your take on that if you have?
Yeah, I've heard, well, not that theory per se, but there have been times when it's not a show of force, but they would knock out some of our nuclear missile capabilities as a way to maybe tell us, we're such a young species, such a young race, just venturing in space for the first time. Really, if you look at a cosmic scale, we're barely making it over the bars of the crib, and I think they know that. And there's been times when nuclear armaments or installations have been knocked out, and in a clean way where there's no radioactivity levels going up or whatever. And I think they keep a close watch to that. See, if anybody out there wants to bitch and wish that the aliens had never shown up, well, you know what? You should turn to your military and says you should have never let off that first atomic bomb. Because if the UFOs were already coming before then, they came here even more after you sent out that beacon. Because they raised their heads up and say, holy shit, the kids have found the matches. And ever since 1945, the UFOs have been here almost nonstop. I'm willing to bet that at least for each day of the year, there's a UFO event taking place, or more than one, taking place somewhere on this planet. And they're keeping watch. So they may be listening. They may be listening to us. And I hope that there is a race out there that will interfere or intercede if they see we're about to do something really stupid that could cause this planet to go completely dry, like Mars, or evaporate our atmosphere, like completely get rid of it, obliterate it. Just like what would have happened if in 1949 or 1950 they would have really detonated an atomic bomb on the moon like they were planning to. Imagine that. If the moon controls all our tides, what if the moon was not there? How much devastation would that have caused? Are they going to want to find out and still want to do it? I think it would be stupid. So I'm hoping that there's a race out there that's keeping watch, because we're not that smart yet, and we have so much more to learn. The more I get into this UFO stuff, and I thought I knew some answers, I realize that I know very little. And that's humbling to a human being. We think we're all that when we're not all that at all. We're just learning, and we're just getting over the bars of the crib, and we're exploring for the first time. And if we need to be put in our place because we're not ready to join the community in space just yet, because we're still violent. I mean, if we could turn things around, we could feed all the poor people, have everybody sheltered, clothed, and fed, and still have enough money to be rich, that'd be awesome. And maybe that's how our civilization survives. But not by having very few own everything and own everyone and have the rest of us suffer.
Quick question for you before we wrap this thing up. Do you believe, focusing on Canada here, that there are extraterrestrials wandering around Canada helping out our military, much like what's happening at Area 51 in the U.S.? I'm from CFB Field, where there's been talk
I don't know. I help is a very, very, is to what extent are they willing to help us? It's like giving a loaded gun to a monkey. There may be things that they're keeping from us because they know we have to evolve at our own rate, no matter what. Just because we know their presence is real and they're here, like from the military standpoint, I don't think they're giving the military everything they want, because you'd be asking for trouble then. So for Canada, I don't know if we had any help that way. Any help we get from them is probably indirectly, like like the moon shots, the moon vehicles, we thought they would have had to be like really sharp-nosed rocket-type vehicles. But when you look at all the space machines that went to the moon, they were like blunt little bodies, They didn't look like anything that could aerodynamically fly. And so who knows what kind of help we got from them, if anything. It just, I don't know. I don't think they're stupid enough to give us a whole bunch of technology, because we're technologically advanced, but our sociology hasn't matched up to it. So that can be very dangerous. Mm-hmm. We can have technology all we want, but if we don't know how to handle it, just like we can't handle completely nuclear energy and contain it properly and dispose of it properly, then there's no way they would give us freely all that stuff in the hopes that, oh yeah, we'll figure it out and we'll use it the right way.
Awesome. Michel Deschamps, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. We got to do this again when your voice is feeling a little bit better, my friend.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can count me in for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. Michel Deschamps is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, noufors.com. That's NOUFORS.com. He's out of Northern Ontario in a town called Sudbury, that is. And I am out of here for the weekend. Spaced Out Weekend, Saturday and Sunday night with Uncle Jimbo James Tyson. It's going to be a great couple of shows, including two mediums and a large on Sunday night. Get your phone calls in. They line up pretty quick on that show. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook page alike, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, we can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. All of our archives are placed on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, Spaced Out Radio Show. We really appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Whether you were in Spaced Out Radio's chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, Paranormal Forum, or SHR Media Network. Thank you so much for being with us. We do this thing 7 days a week. Let us be your official one-stop shop for all the weird, arcane, and obtuse. Once again, we got Ron Bumblefoot THAL, the official music of Spaced Out Radio. He is the guitar god himself. Always appreciate your time. What else can we talk about before we wrap this up? I'm heading off into the wilderness. I got my bag packed. I have my shoes ready. They're tightened up. They are on. Got my ball cap turned backwards. And I'm heading out into the wilderness. Hopefully I'll find a cave that has a good Wi-Fi signal that I could steal off Kevin the Sasquatch that seems to hang around James's show. It's always fun. Always good. Thank you so much for being with us. Remember, do me a favor. Tell a friend. Let them know. Talk to you in 48 hours.